Hi everyone, we will have lecture over nutrition and metabolism today. It's going to be part one, which is overview of nutrition and metabolism. We will also talk about the major nutrients that are needed by our body. Now, what is nutrition? Nutrition is study of nutrients and how our body uses them. Now, what is nutrients? Nutrients are chemicals from the environment that organisms need for survival. So this is the chemical that is needed by our body to survive. And used to supply energy, so mostly is used for energy and also for building blocks of our body, like for example, building block for proteins, nucleic acids, and also some hormones, enzymes, for example. So these are the nutrients, which is chemicals from the environment that organisms need for survival and usually used for energy, fuel for metabolic process, and also for building materials. Two major nutrients classes. The first one is called the macronutrients, and from the name, we use them a lot. We need them a lot. So this is the major nutrients. It's required in large quantities, such as carbohydrates, lipids, and protein. Mostly, these macronutrients are needed for energy and also for building block. Another class is called the micronutrients. It is required in small amounts, such as vitamins, minerals, and these used for other process, like for example, for part of the enzymatic process in our body. There are also a group of nutrients called the essential nutrients. And these essential nutrients are nutrients that the body cannot make. So we cannot make this essential nutrient. It has to be provided from outside. Okay, so these essential nutrients are nutrients that has to be provided from outside. And it has to be obtained from the diet. Calories is a unit of heat used to express the amounts of energy in the food. So when we measure the energy in the food, we're going to use the unit called the calorie. Now we start with the first major nutrients or macronutrients, which is the carbohydrates. Carbohydrate is organic compounds such as sugars, starches, starch. This energy held in the chemical bonds is used to power our cellular process. So the main energy that is used in our body is actually coming from these carbohydrates. So carbohydrate is the main energy source for our body. The carbohydrate sources, so polysaccharides, this is complex carbohydrates such as starch from plants, and glycogen from meat or from animal. So just for information, starch is a type of polysaccharide that is present in plant. Okay, like for example, potatoes, rice, for example, they have a lot of starch because this is the carbohydrate storage in the plant. While the glycogen is the polysaccharide or carbohydrate storage in animal. So it is in the meat. The second carbohydrate type is called the disaccharide. Di mean two, okay? So poly mean many, okay? Saccharide means sugar. Okay, so a polysaccharide means there are many sugars in these molecules, while disaccharide is actually consists of two sugars only. Okay, two monosaccharides in the molecules. Like for example, milk sugar is called lactose. Okay, it actually consists of one glucose and one galactose. The cane sugar is called the sucrose. This is actually consists of glucose and fructose. Okay, beet sugar, molasses, and the last one is called the monosaccharide. Okay, mono mean single. Okay, so this is single sugar, like glucoses. Okay, so example of monosaccharide are glucoses, fructoses, and galactoses. This is the one that presents a lot in the environment, especially glucose, that in the form of monosaccharide. Digestion will break this polysaccharide and also disaccharides into the monosaccharide. So this monosaccharide is actually the one that will be absorbed in the small intestine. Okay, so this is the one that will be absorbed and go to our bloodstream and absorbed from the small intestine after digestion. Cellulose is a complex of carbohydrates abundant in the food, mainly plants, okay, but it is not digested. Okay, but it helps us to provide fibers. Okay, so cellulose, it is part of the plant cell that is not really digested by our body, but it helps us to be healthy by providing fibers. Now, carbohydrate use. Different monosaccharides are absorbed from digestive tract, like fructose, galactose, and glucose. So I already mentioned this three types of monosaccharide. That is actually the products of digestion of polysaccharides. So maybe fructose, galactose, and glucose. And glucose is the most common cellular fuel that is used to make ATP. Okay, so this is the main source of energy to make the ATP in our cell. Okay, glucose is broken down into carbon dioxide, water, and the energy that we need. And this energy is in the form of ATP. Okay, so ATP is the energy that is used by our cell for all process in our body. And it is mostly converted or produced from the breakdown of glucose. Excess glucose will be converted into glycogen. By the process is called the glycogenesis, and mostly these glycogens will be stored in liver and muscle cell. So liver and muscle cell are the primary place for storing the glycogen. So if we have excess glucose, mostly it will be converted into glycogen. If we have more, okay, so many glucose, some of them will be converted into lipids, into fat that will be stored in the fat tissue, adipose tissue. After storing certain amount of glycogen, okay, excess glucose converted into fat. So I just mentioned that, okay. by the process called the lipogenesis. And it is stored in the fat tissue in our body. It's called the adipose tissue. So if we eat a lot, okay, we only need certain number or concentration of glucose to be used for our energy every day. But if we have extra glucose, it will be converted first into glycogen. If we still have more than needed, and then the rest will be converted into fat. It will be stored in the adipose tissue. Therefore, we will usually gain weight if we have too much extra glucose. Many cells can break down the fatty acid for energy, but some require glucose. And gluconeogenesis, conversion of non-carbohydrate like amino acid, glycerol to glucose for cell for the energy source. For example, if we are fasting, for example, so we don't have enough glucose in our body, then amino acids, glycerol, can be converted into glucose to make the ATP. This is conversions of other monosaccharide to glucose. And just remember, for the cellular respirations, mostly the process starts with the glucose, okay? The glycolysis, and then prep reactions, okay? And then after that, the citric acid cycle, and then the electron transport process. All of them will produce ATP. So mostly one molecule of glucose will produce about 38 ATP in the mitochondria. So other monosaccharide like fructose and galactose, it cannot be used directly to make the ATP. They all will be converted into the glucose. And then glucose that will go to the process to produce the ATP is called the cellular respiration. Okay, this is carbohydrate. Again, this is what we eat. So mostly we eat starch, like from potato, okay, bread, rice. They contain many starch, which is polysaccharide. And then if we take sugar, okay, table sugar, it mostly sucrose, which is disaccharide. Okay, so sucrose consists of glucose and fructose. Okay, while starch is actually consists of many glucose, maybe thousands or hundreds of glucose. Sucrose only contains two monosaccharides, which is glucose and fructose. So when it is digested, it will produce glucose and fructose. Starch, when it is digested, it will produce the glucose, many glucose. Maltose, this is also disaccharide, consists of glucose and glucose. So there are two glucose bind together to make maltose. When it is digested, then it will produce the glucose and glucose, two glucoses. Lactose, like in the milk, so there are a lot of lactose in the milk. This is also disaccharide. It consists of two monosaccharides, which is glucose and galactose. So when it is digested, it will produce glucose and galactose. And usually for this digestion in our body, they require enzyme. The enzyme that digests starch is called amylase. Okay, amylase. Amylum is actually starch, so ACE, this is referred to enzyme that digests the amylum or the starch. The one that digests sucrose is called sucrase. Okay, so ACE refer to enzyme that digest the sucrose. So sucrose is the substrate. Maltose digested by maltase to produce glucose and glucose. Lactose in the milk will be digested by lactase. Okay, so that's the name, the enzyme that digests lactose into glucose and galactose. Some people actually do not produce lactase, or they produce lactase very few, few concentration. What happened with this person? They have become what we call the lactose intolerance people, because they're unable to digest the lactose because they do not really have enough lactase or do not produce lactase. Okay. So this monosaccharide, whether glucose, fructose, galactose, then will be entered into our blood system, will be carried into the cell. Okay, and in the cell will be converted into energy, which is ATP. And the process is called the cellular respiration. So this is the main process, okay, which is glucose over here, okay, will be converted into ATP with two byproduct, which is water and carbon dioxide. And this carbon dioxide will be removed from our body, will be exhaled. And for this cellular respiration, it requires oxygen. So glucose plus oxygen will produce this energy, ATP, plus carbon dioxide and water. If we have extra glucose, then with the process called the glycogenesis, it will store in the liver as glycogen. So glycogen is actually polysaccharide. Okay, so start, this is polysaccharide. Okay, especially in plant. This is glycogen, is polysaccharide in animal. Okay, usually in liver and muscle cell. Okay, sucrose, maltose, lactose, all of them is called disaccharide. Okay, it consists two sugar, okay, two monosaccharide. So glucose, fructose, and galactose, they are monosaccharide. Okay, and then if we still have extra glucoses or monosaccharide, then it will be stored, it will be converted into fat, it will be stored in adipose tissue, in fat tissue in our body. So glycogen is stored in liver and muscle cell. So these are the carbohydrate digestions and use. Carbohydrate requirements for the body. Okay. This is the primary source of fuel. So this is the one that produces ATP. Okay, so this is the primary source for making ATP. That's the carbohydrate. Okay, especially the glucoses. Okay, after it's digested into glucoses, and glucoses will be used for making ATP, especially with oxygen. So glucoses plus oxygen will produce this ATP plus water and carbon dioxide. Okay, so need for carbohydrates within individual energy and requirement. Like for example, if we are active, then we need more carbohydrate. For people that is not really active, they actually require less carbohydrate. Minimal requirement for carbohydrate in human diet is unknown, but intake at least 125 to 175 grams per day is likely necessary. Okay? So about 125 125 to 175 gram per day that is required or needed. Average diet in carbohydrate diet in United States is around 200 to 300. It's actually more than required. Okay, so this is the reason why in average, okay, American people, they have gained weight, okay, or overweight in average, okay, due to the intake of carbohydrate is more than it is required in average. Okay, the second micronutrient is lipids. Okay, so this is fat. Okay. Lipids is organic compounds that include fat, oil, phospholipids, and cholesterol. So these are the lipids that usually taken into our body. Lipids can be also used for supply energy for a cellular process. So when the glucose is not available, then lipids can be used to make ATP. Okay, but it has to be converted into glucose. Okay, some of them serve as a building block structure such as for the cell membrane. Remember, cell membranes is consists of two layers of phospholipid. Okay, so phospholipid by layers. So that's the plasma membrane. Also in the plasma membrane, there is a cholesterol. Okay, so this lipid is needed for building block of the cell, which is for phospholipid bilayer, and also for strengthen the cell membrane, which is the cholesterol. Triglyceride is composed of glycerols and 3 fatty acids. This is the most common dietary lipids that we take, and is also called fats. So these are the group of lipids that usually we take from diet. The source, the triglycerides, are mainly found in the plant-based and animal-based food. So food that contain fat, mostly they have triglycerides on it. And then saturated fat, saturated mean the fat that is actually solid in room temperature, like from the animal origin, such as margarine, meat, the egg, lard. Palm and coconut oil also have saturated fat. It is the reason why during the winter time, for example, this oil that made from palm and coconut, they usually become solid in the lower temperature. And these saturated fat do not have double bond, okay, between the carbon atom in the fatty acid. And this is associated with increased risk of cardiovascular system. Okay, you can imagine that saturated fat, they have become solid in the room temperature. It also means that they are become a little bit solid in our blood circulation. It can block the blood circulation. Unsaturated fat, it means that it has double bond, okay, found mainly in the seed, nuts, and plant oil. They mostly become liquid in the room temperature, contain one or more double bonds between carbon atom. So saturated fat will be like this, okay, all filled with hydrogen. That's what is called saturated. Okay, so this is the structure of saturated. The non-saturated, okay, maybe look like this, maybe 2 or 3 or 1 double bond. Okay, so hydrogens, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, you see this double bond? This is the one that causes the fat become fluidy. Okay, a little bit fluid, and it's causing that fat become liquid in room temperature. Example is oil. Okay, so cooking oil, mostly unsaturated fat. But the saturated fat like margarine, okay, lard, butter, they all solid in room temperature. Because what? Because they are saturated fat. Cholesterol is another type of fat that is coming from our food or diet. They are also made in liver. So liver can also make cholesterol. So we actually have cholesterol from our own, which is made in liver, but we can also take cholesterol from our diet. In the diet, for example, the whole milk, butter, cheese, meat, they have cholesterol. And cholesterol is not found in the food or plant origin. So there will be no cholesterol in the cooking oil that is made from plant, like olive oil, for example. Okay, olive oil, there will be no cholesterols in it. Lipid use, okay, so lipid in food include phospholipids, cholesterol, and most commonly the triglyceride or fat. Right? This is the regular name for triglyceride is just called fat. For example, it meat, there is fat on it. That fat mostly is actually triglyceride. Functions of lipids mainly for supply energy. Remember, if we don't have enough glucose, then lipids can be used as a source of energy to make ATP. Contain more twice as much a chemical per gram as carbohydrate and protein. So carbohydrate is contains about 4.1 calorie per gram. Okay, protein is also around 4.1 calorie per gram. Fat or lipid, it contains about 9.2 calorie per gram. So it's actually twice of carbohydrates or protein. So if you eat burger, for example, they usually give you the number of calorie that present on that burger. Let's say they say, okay, that burger have 1,000 calorie. So what does that mean? You can actually see from how many gram of carbohydrate, which is the bread on the burger, okay, and then how many proteins is from the meat, and how many lipid or fats on the meat. So when it is calculated, they can say, oh, this is around 1,000 calorie in that food, in that burger. Okay, so it's actually coming from what they have in that burger, whether carbohydrate, proteins, and lipids. Triglycerides are broken down into glycerol and fatty acid, in order to release energy. So this is actually the structure of triglyceride. Okay, it has one molecule of glycerol, and this molecule of glycerol bind with molecule of fatty acid. Okay, So some of the fatty acid may be saturated, may be unsaturated fatty acid. So 1, 2, 3. So therefore it's called the 3. 3 fatty acid and 1 glycerol. So 3 glyceride. Okay, that's the name. So 3 fatty acid, 1 glycerol. Okay, so glycerol and fatty acids can be used to synthesize storage of fats in adipose tissue. So if we don't really use them for making ATP, then it will be stored in our fat tissue. Excess glucose or amino acid can be also converted into fat, and then it will be stored in this adipose tissue. So if we need more calorie that we need it per day, let's say we only need 2,000 calorie per day, but we eat maybe 5,000 calorie per day, then what happened? The rest will be stored. Some of them will be stored as a glycogen, and most of them will be stored as fat in the fat tissue. This is the pathway of fat or triglycerides, okay, after the hydrolysis, which is the digestion, okay, the fat or triglyceride will be converted into glycerol and fatty acid. This glycerol can be converted into glucose, and then it can be used to make ATP. Okay, start with the glycolysis, and then going to prep reactions. Okay, and then citric acid cycle, which is going here. Okay, and then there will be electrons transport and produce the energy, the ATP. Or this glycerol can be converted directly into acetyl-CoA, and this is actually this prep reaction will produce the acetyl-CoA. Okay, the same process, and this acetyl-CoA will go to the citric acid cycle. Okay, over here, and then produce the ATP, carbon dioxide, and water. Or the fatty acid can be also converted directly into acetyl-CoA, going into the citric acid cycle, and then the rest will go to the electrons transport chain and produce the energy. Extra can be converted into ketone. And then extra, if we don't use them, then it will be converted into fat storage. Okay, the lipid use. So what we use, that lipid that we eat. Liver can convert fatty acid into different type of fatty acid. There are so many type of fatty acids, and liver actually can convert one fatty acid to another fatty acid. Liver cannot synthesize certain fatty acid, and this, the one that cannot be made in our body, is called the essential fatty acid. It has to be provided or obtained from the diet. So there are some fatty acid that we need that is actually cannot be made in liver. It has to be provided from the diet. Lipid can combine with the protein to form the lipoproteins. Okay? Mostly these lipoproteins present in the blood plasma. Okay, so these lipoproteins can be classified based on density. Like for examples, FLDLS, very low density lipoprotein. This will have high triglyceride contents. So if you go to doctor or clinic, for example, they will measure this FDLD as a triglyceride concentrations. Okay. And this lipoprotein is actually used for lipid transport. The second type of lipoprotein is called the LDL, low density lipoprotein. It means that it has high cholesterol contents. So it means that if you have higher LDL, so it is the same as you have higher risk of getting cardiovascular disease because of this cholesterol level that is increased in the LDL. So LDL level has to be low in number when you measure it. HDL, this is opposite of LDL. This is high density lipoprotein. It has more protein compared to the cholesterol. So this one, we have to have higher HDL. This means good or healthy. Okay, so therefore sometimes this HDL is also known as a hero cholesterol or hero lipoprotein. The LDL, we can use L over here as a loser. So loser cholesterol or bad cholesterol. So this is good lipoprotein. Okay, so that's the difference between LDL and the HDL. Liver control the cholesterol level produced by the liver and released into the blood. So liver can produce cholesterol. It can also destroy the cholesterol. It can be used to make bile salt. So when the cholesterol destroy in the liver, it produces the bile salt, and the bile salt will be excreted into the bile. So the production of bile salt sometimes stimulated by fiber. Fiber in our diet, in our intestine. So this is the connection why eat fiber will lower the risk of having cardiovascular disease, because this higher fiber diet will increase the production of bile salt. And in order to make bile salt, it will destroy or convert cholesterol. So break the cholesterol down. It means that it will causing cholesterol level in our blood become lower. Okay, so that's the connection with fiber and lower cholesterol level. Adipose tissue stores and release triglyceride as needed. Okay, so the triglyceride, the fat, extra fat will be stored in the fat tissue or adipose tissue. Now, this is the schematic of lipids. Okay, start with triglyceride or fat that we eat. Okay, digested into fatty acid and glycerol. So 3 fatty acid actually and 1 glycerol. It will go to liver. In the liver, this fatty acid and glycerol can be converted back into triglyceride or into lipoproteins, or the fatty acid, other type of fatty acid. So from 1 to 3, it become different type of fatty acid, or it can be converted into cholesterol, or it can made into phospholipid. And these phospholipids will be used as a cell membrane. Okay, cholesterol can be used for other process, like for example, sexual hormone. This is the same structure with the cholesterol. So these are the lipids used in our body. Lipid requirement. So this is varies within human. Okay, Some people can take more fat or less fat. American Heart Association advised that the diet not exceed 30% of total daily calories. Okay, so if you eat burger, for example, that has 1,000 calorie, okay, so the 30%, which is 300 calorie, so should be less than 300 is coming from fat. The rest should come from the carbohydrates or proteins. Okay, so this is the requirement for diet. Monounsaturated fat like in avocados, olive oil, healthier than saturated fat like in butter, lard, margarine. So look, this unsaturated, it is better than saturated fat. Remember, saturated means become solid in room temperature. It might be solid in stickier in our blood circulation. People have different lipid requirement based on stage of life and activity level. Fat intake must be sufficient to support the absorption of fat-soluble vitamins like vitamin A, D, E, and K. They require fat in diet in order to be absorbed. And so most of these vitamin D are really important for our body. Okay, like vitamin D over here, it will make bone harder. Okay, so vitamin E, vitamin K, this is part of coagulations in our blood. So we need it when we are bleeding, for example, for blood clotting. Okay, vitamin A is needed for our eyes, okay, and many other functions. So we need fat in our diet to increase the reabsorption of these vitamins A, D, E, and K. The last one, okay, the major protein is the major nutrient is the proteins. Okay? Protein consists of chains of amino acids. So there are 1,000 or 100 amino acids that chains together to make this protein. Have many functions, including building new protein, like structural proteins. Okay, like muscle mostly has proteins to produce enzyme, hormones, antibodies. They are actually protein. Clotting factor like fibrinogen. Okay, fibrin. They are actually protein, and other plasma protein, albumin, globulins. Okay, these are protein. It has to be made from protein or amino acid that we take from diet. Protein also supply the energy. So if we don't have enough glucose, then protein can be broken down into amino acids, and amino acids can be used for making ATP. This amino acid, when it is broken down, then it will produce the byproduct. It's called the urea, and this urea will be excreted in the urine. Okay, so that is the urine is coming from. Mostly it has a lot of urea, and urea is the byproduct of amino acid metabolism. Excess amino acid can be converted into glucose or fat, and this fat, then it will be stored in the adipose tissue. So this is the schematic of proteins in our body. So protein in our diet will be digested, will produce amino acid, and this amino acid can go different way. It's become building block of structured proteins like muscle, for example. Okay, myosin, actin is actually protein. Enzyme, all enzyme is actually protein. Hormone, there are many hormones made of protein, like insulin, for example. Growth hormone is made of protein. Plasma protein, okay, albumin, globulin, fibrinogens, these are proteins. It can be also used for making energy. It has to be converted into glucose, and then with oxygen, it can be converted into ATP plus extra product like carbon dioxide and hydrogen. If we still have extra, then it can be converted into fat and mostly will be stored in the adipose tissue. So this is the schematics usage of fat in our body. Okay, the protein pathway in the body, protein from our food with the digestion, hydrolysis, it's become amino acids. With the deamination, it will produce urea, okay? And this one will be excreted through the urine. It will be filtered by the kidney and produce the urine. And then amino acid may be converted into glucose and fat. And this glucose can be used for ATP, produce ATP, or some of amino acids can be converted into the acetyl-CoA and then going to the citric acid cycle, which is cellular respiration, and produce the energy or the ATP with the byproduct of carbon dioxide and water. The protein source, okay, food contain proteins mostly from meat, fish, poultry, cheese, nuts, milk, eggs. They are high of proteins. Legumes like bean and peas also contains some protein. There are actually 20 types of amino acid that is needed by our body. 12 of them can be synthesized mostly in liver, but 8 of them cannot be synthesized. And this is what we call the essential amino acid. It has to be provided from diets. Okay. All 20 amino acids must be present at the same time in order for protein synthesis to occur. If one amino acid is missing, any protein that requires that amino acid cannot be produced. So it's really important. We should have 20 amino acids in our body. Essential amino acids are not stored in the body, so we have to take it from diet. Okay. Complete proteins, highly quality protein contains adequate amounts of the essential amino acid for good health. Found in meat. So meat actually have complete 20 amino acid, milk and eggs. So if we consume this, then it should be enough for having these 20 required amino acid. Incomplete proteins, low quality proteins, which do not contain adequate amounts of essential amino acid in plant protein. So people that vegetarian, sometimes they do not get enough 20 type of amino acids. Certain combination of plant protein, like bean and rice, provide adequate diversity of dietary amino acid. So for the vegetarian, they have to eat not only one type of veggie, but they have to make a combination of vegetables that they eat in order to get all the 20 type of amino acid needed by our body. Okay, so these are the list of the 20 amino acid. Alanine, so 12 of them made in our body, so we can make in liver, but 8 of them, like this one, isoleucine, leucine, lysine, methionine, phenylalanine, threonine, tryptophan, and valine. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 of this amino acid has to be provided from diet. So this is essential amino acid. Nitrogen's balance. In healthy adult, protein is continues to build up the broken down. Okay? It's like our muscle is built muscle. Sometimes our muscles all become smaller because the protein actually loose from our muscle. Our hair is actually made of protein. So we build protein and we also lose some of the protein. Okay, overall gain should equal overall loss. Okay? So this produce the dynamic equilibrium. Since protein contain high percentage of nitrogens, dynamic equilibrium leads a state of nitrogen balance. So there are two types of nitrogen balance. Negative nitrogen balance developed from starvation. If it is starvation, that usually we have negative balance. And positive nitrogen balance. This is usually for growing children, pregnant women, and athletes. They eat a lot of nitrogen, a lot of proteins, though they have their positive nitrogen balance that will be used for their activity or growing their muscle. For children, it's growing muscles and also their bones. Protein requirements. Protein provide nitrogens and other elements producing non-essential amino acid and certain non-protein nitrogenous substances. Dietary protein intake varies according to the body size, metabolic rate, and nitrogen balance condition. Typically, daily protein intake recommended is 10% of the person diet. 0.8 gram per kilogram body, or if you use pound, is 0.4 gram per pound of body weight. Most people should consume 60 to 150 gram protein per day. Okay, 2 to 5 ounce per day. Deficiency of protein leads to tissue wasting and a decline of plasma protein, which is result in decreased plasma osmotic pressure and nutritional edema. So sometimes it is a dangerous thing when we have deficiency of proteins. Okay, this is the summary of carbohydrate, lipids, and proteins nutrients. So this is the major nutrients that we take in our body. So carbohydrates primarily from starch, so this is polysaccharide, and sugar in food or plant origins. 325, okay, for the required daily intake. It has 4.1 calorie per gram, and this is used for energy, so mostly used for energy. Excess of carbohydrate can make, causing the obesity, dental caries, nutritional deficits. Deficiency can cause what we call the metabolic acidosis. Lipids in the meat, eggs, milk, lard, plant oil, about 42 to 78. The calorie is 9.5 per gram. It can be used for energy, production of cellular membrane, making phospholipid. If increased, excess can cause obesity. And if it is deficiency, can cause the weight loss. Proteins is from meat, cheese, nuts, cereal, about 50 to 175 gram daily, 4.1 calorie. It can be used for building the structure like a muscle cell, enzymes, hormones. Excess can cause obesity, and Deficiency can cause extreme weight loss. So energy expenditure, carbohydrate, fat, protein is supply energy for all metabolic race, metabolic process. Deficiency can cause structural and molecular leading to death. So deficiency of this can make some of our muscle or part of body will be consumed and used for energy. Excess can lead obesity and damaging the health. Energy values of the food, calorie, the amount of potential energy that the food contains. Calorie is actually unit of heat. Okay, it's measured with the calorimeter. So carbohydrate 4.1 calorie per gram, protein content 4.1 calorie per gram, lipids about 9.5 calorie per gram. This is the unit or the equipment used for measuring the calorie in food. Energy requirements, basal metabolic rate or BMR, is the rate at which body expends energy under basal condition, which is resting condition or in resting in a comfortable environment. This is what we call the basal metabolic rate. And mainly our energy for use for this maintaining the BMR. This BMR mainly reflects energy needed to support the activities of the organ. BMR varies within gender, body size, body temperature, thyroid hormone activity. Maintaining BMR require body greatest energy expenditure. So the energy that we have mostly used for the BMR. In addition to the BMR, okay, the energy is also used for support our muscular activity, maintain body temperature, and for growth in children and pregnant women. This table showing you the calories used during various activities, like for example, walking upstairs, it's take about 1100 calories per hour. Running or jogging is about 570 calories per hour. Swimming take about 500 calories per hour. Vigorous exercise take about 450 calories per hour. Slow walking take about 200 calories per hour. Dressing and undressing about 118 calories per hour. Sitting at rest take about or use about 100 calories per hour. The energy balance, so this actually the balance energy that we use from our food. So since this energy balance exists when the calorie intake from food equals to calorie output from the BMR and muscular activities. So if we only use our energy for this BMR and muscular activity, if it is equal to the calorie intake, then our body weight will remain constant. Okay, however, our body usually sometimes have a positive or negative energy balance. So positive energy balance where the calorie intake exceed the output. So you have more calorie intake than the calorie that we use for exercise, for example. The tissue will store the excess nutrients, mostly in the form of fats, okay, in adipose tissue, okay, and it will lead to weight gain. in the negative energy balance, the calorie expenditure exceeds the intake. So we actually use more calorie than our intake of calorie. And then the tissue are broken down for energy, and usually it will lead to the weight loss. Now, when we talk about desirable weight, this is most common nutrition disorder involve calorie imbalances. Desirable weight is difficult to determine. Usually we use BMI, okay, to measure our desirable body weight. So a person will be classified based on the BMI, whether underweight, normal weight, overweight, or obese. Normal weight or desirable weight is defined as BMI of 19 to 24. So the lowest BMI for normal or desirable weight is 19. The highest is 24. If it is under 19, that person is considered as underweight. If it is over 24, like 25 to 30, then this person is considered as overweight. If it is over 30, like 31 and over, it is 20% of desirable body weight, then that person is considered as obese. So obesity is when the person has BMI over 30. Obesity is usually more correctly defined as excess of adipose tissue. So this is the table for the BMI. If you see here, so this is 19 to 24. This is the desirable body weight or BMI. So this is actually calculated based on the height and the weight of that person. Okay. So under 19 is considered as underweight. It is over 24 to 30, then it is considered as overweight. If it is over 30, 31 to maybe 60, for example, it is considered as obese. So this is the BMI chart. Now, what is obesity? So obesity is considered as when someone has 20% over the desirable body weight. Almost 1/3 of adults in United States is actually in status of obesity. And obesity increases the risk of type 2 diabetes, digestive disorder, heart disease, kidney failure, hypertension, stroke, and certain cancer. So obesity is actually increasing these diseases. Both heredity and environment can contribute to the obesity. Certain genes are involved with the control of hunger and satiety by the hypothalamus. Treatment, diet, and exercise. Losing 1 pound requires burning of 3,500 calories. Drug therapy can be effective, but many drugs are harmful. Surgery, 3 types of bariatric surgery are used to treat this obesity. Now, this is the appetite control. So appetite drive that compel us to seek food. So this is the feeling of hunger and also want to eat. Control center actually located in the hypothalamus. This is really important part of the brain, part of the diencephalons, that control our appetite. This is also the one that control hormones in our body. Under control of several hormones and neurotransmitter. Like for example, insulin. This hormone is produced by pancreas after eating. So usually we'll produce this insulin after we eat because we actually have carbohydrates that stimulate the productions of insulin. And this stimulate the adipocyte to take up glucose and store fat, and other cell to take up glucose and store glycogen. So insulin actually increase the storage of fat and also storage of glycogen. Leptin, this is the hormone that is produced by adipocyte, okay, fat tissue, while we eating, act as on the hypothalamus to suppress appetite by inhibiting the release of neuropeptide Y. So this actually the substance that stimulate appetite. Okay, just remember this neuropeptide Y produced by the hypothalamus. This is the one that control our appetite. So this neuropeptide Y is actually inhibited by leptin. So leptin causing us to feel full, okay, or inhibit the appetite. Neuropeptide Y, okay, this is neurotransmitter released by the hypothalamus in response of the hormone ghrelin. The ghrelin is the one that stimulates the production of neuropeptide, and then it will stimulate appetite. So look at these two hormones over here, leptin and ghrelin. Okay, leptin is inhibit neuropeptide Y. Okay, therefore it inhibit appetite. Okay, inhibit appetite. Ghrelin, it stimulate neuropeptide Y. So this ghrelin will stimulate appetite. Okay, so ghrelin stimulate appetite, leptin inhibit appetite. Okay, so ghrelin is hormone secreted by stomach that stimulate or enhance appetite by causing the secretion of the neuropeptide Y from hypothalamus. Okay, so this is the summary of substance that control appetite. First is insulin produced by pancreas. It stimulates adipocyte tissue to admit glucose and store fat, glycogen synthesis. So this is the one that causes the storage of nutrients into the adipose tissue, and also the storage of glucose, which is glycogen, in liver and muscle. Okay, leptin produced by the adipocyte or fat tissue, and the function is to suppress appetite, okay, which is by suppressing neuropeptide Y products. Okay, so increase metabolic rate after eating. Neuropeptide Y, this is neurotransmitter produced by the hypothalamus, and this is the one that enhance appetite. And then ghrelin produced by stomach. This is stimulate production of neuropeptide Y, And then this will also stimulate or enhance the appetite. Now the control, so this is going to be negative feedback control for appetite. Remember, two hormones involved over here, leptin and ghrelin, and the main substance will be the neuropeptide Y. Okay, so this neuropeptide Y over here is the main substance that increase the appetite. So let's say when we eat, okay, then the food intake excess of caloric need, the adipocyte tissue will produce the leptin. Okay, so after we eat, okay, it will stimulate the production of leptin from the adipose tissue. It will carry by the bloodstream, go to the hypothalamus. It will inhibit, okay, the neuropeptide Y production. Therefore, it will inhibit or decrease the appetite or suppress the appetite. Now, what happens if we do not eat? Okay, then let's say when we're fasting, then the stomach will produce hormone called the ghrelin. The ghrelin will be carried by the bloodstream into the hypothalamus, and this ghrelin will stimulate the production of neuropeptide Y, and then this neuropeptide Y will enhance the appetite. So we feel want to eat, so we feel hungry. So this is the control of our appetite. Again, leptin suppress appetite, ghrelin enhance appetite. I think that's all for part number 1. We will continue on part number 2. Goodbye now.